Her body was found last month at an Elmsford motel. News 12's Lauren Del Val was at Westchester County Court for the hearing.
This is the story of Roseberline Philippe. Room 230 at the Days Inn Motel in Elmsford, New York, sat silent on the afternoon of November 2nd, 2025. The cleaning staff had their routine. Check the rooms. Change the sheets. Move to the next one. But when they opened the door to room 230, the routine ended. Inside, they found the body of Roseberline Philippe. The 32-year-old office assistant from White Plains Hospital had been beaten to death. The assault had lasted hours. Her 2-year-old son had been in the room the entire time. 8 hours earlier, surveillance cameras captured Philippe arriving at the motel at 8:30 a.m. with her ex-boyfriend, Justin Bartley, and their toddler. The footage showed them entering room 230 together. For the next 8 hours, nothing. No one checked. No one heard. No one intervened. At 4:30 p.m., the cameras recorded Bartley leaving with the child. Philippe remained behind, dead in the room where she had spent her final hours. The day before, Philippe's family had confronted Bartley at their White Plains home. They told him to leave. They told him it was over. Philippe's sister later said, "We thought she was coming home." But Bartley had other plans. He was already on probation for weapons possession and drunk driving. He had pending charges from May for the same offenses. He knew the system. He knew his time was running out. And he knew Philippe was trying to escape. By the time housekeeping found her body, Bartley had fled to the Bronx. He left the child with relatives. Within hours, a multi-agency task force arrested him.
Family and friends of 32-year-old Roseberline Rose Philippe packed the courtroom. Bartley appeared before County Court Judge Maurice Williams. Bartley is accused of murdering Philippe, his ex-girlfriend, in the presence of their 2-year-old son at the Elmsford Days Inn. He was indicted on second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child. During a brief court appearance, the attorney for 32-year-old Bartley pled not guilty on his behalf. Philippe's family was also issued temporary orders of protection. Rose's father Benoit and brother Benel spoke with me afterwards off camera. They both say Bartley had shown aggressive tendencies previously and just want justice for the, quote, senseless killing.
The evidence was clear. The timeline was documented. The surveillance footage told the story. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in. Roseberline Philippe was born on April 10, 1993. By the time of her death on November 2, 2025, she had lived 32 years. She left behind her mother Yvette, her father Benoit, and her siblings, Ivina, Eve, Ilnise, and Bernaflor. The Philippe family had established themselves in the White Plains area of New York, creating a tight-knit family unit that would later play a central role in trying to protect Roseberline from the man who would kill her. Those who knew Roseberline described specific character traits that defined her interactions with the world. Despite facing life's challenges, she maintained a consistent demeanor. She never lost her smile. She faced every struggle with what observers called courage and faith. She spread what those around her characterized as love and positivity wherever she went. These traits would later be identified as both her strength and, paradoxically, her vulnerability. Roseberline attended Port Chester High School in Port Chester, New York. The school, a public institution founded in 1929, served as the location where she would first encounter Justin Bartley, the man who would later become the father of her child and, ultimately, her killer. After completing her education, Roseberline secured employment as an office assistant at White Plains Hospital in New York. At 32 years old, she maintained this position while raising her young son. Her LinkedIn profile reflected her professional life, though the details of her workplace relationships and professional reputation remain documented primarily through the memories of those who worked alongside her. Roseberline's sister Ivina provided specific descriptions of her personality. She was so sweet and always laughing even if she was dealing with stuff, Ivina stated. This observation indicated that Roseberline maintained her outward composure even when facing internal struggles. Ivina added another critical observation. She was a giver and he took advantage of her in that way. This statement identified a pattern that would become relevant in understanding the dynamics of her relationship with Bartley. Campaign organizers who later worked to support her family described her as a devoted mother, a loving daughter, and an amazing friend. Her giving nature created a specific vulnerability. People who consistently give without expectation of return can become targets for those who seek to take. Within her tight-knit family, Roseberline played a role that extended beyond mere sibling relationships. She lived with her parents in White Plains while raising her child, creating a multi-generational household that would later attempt to intervene in her increasingly dangerous relationship. In 2023, Roseberline Philippe gave birth to a son. The couple, Roseberline and Justin Bartley, now shared a 2-year-old child. Motherhood brought joy, but it also brought challenges that would fundamentally alter Roseberline's perspective on her relationship with Bartley. The responsibilities of caring for an infant, the sleepless nights, the constant vigilance required for a young child's safety. All of these factors created new pressures on an already complex relationship. Motherhood triggered protective instincts in Roseberline. These instincts would later manifest in her reported growing fear of Bartley and her attempts to end the relationship. When a woman becomes a mother, her calculation of acceptable risk changes. Behaviors she might have tolerated when only her own safety was at stake became intolerable when her child's well-being entered the equation. Living with her parents in White Plains while raising her child provided Roseberline with a support system. Her mother Yvette and father Benoit were present. Her siblings were nearby. This family structure would later play a crucial role on November 1, 2025, when the family collectively confronted Bartley and told him to leave. But in 2023, as Roseberline adjusted to motherhood, this same family structure provided day-to-day support that allowed her to maintain her job at White Plains Hospital while caring for her young son. The child, now 2 years old at the time of his mother's death, would become both a witness to violence and a survivor of trauma. His presence in room 230 on November 2, 2025, would result in Justin Bartley facing an additional charge, endangering the welfare of a child. Roseberline Philippe and Justin Bartley first met years earlier at Portchester High School. Both attended the same public school in Portchester, New York. The school, founded in 1929, had served generations of students in the community. Within its halls, 2 teenagers who would later be bound by parenthood and, ultimately, by violence, first encountered each other. The initial attraction and early relationship dynamics between them remain documented only through later recollections. What is known is that their high school connection did not immediately develop into a sustained relationship. They went their separate ways after high school. Years passed. Lives were lived. But at some point in adulthood, they reconnected. They sparked up a romance years later, according to reports. The rekindling of their relationship in adulthood appeared, at least initially, promising. Adult relationships that begin as reunions often carry the weight of nostalgia. There is a sense of what might have been that can obscure present realities. Friends and family who might have warned about red flags in a new relationship sometimes hold back when the relationship is a rekindling of an old flame. They knew each other in high school, becomes a form of vetting that may not be warranted. Justin Bartley was 32 years old at the time of his arrest for the murder of Roseberline Philippe. Like Roseberline, he had attended Portchester High School. But while Roseberline's post-high school life led to steady employment and motherhood, Bartley's path included multiple criminal convictions. In 2022, 3 years before he would kill Roseberline, Bartley pleaded guilty in Rockland County Court to 2 charges. Second-degree attempted criminal possession of a weapon and driving while intoxicated, DWI. These were not minor infractions. Weapons charges indicate either an intent to harm or a disregard for public safety. DWI charges indicate impaired judgment and a willingness to endanger others. The court sentenced Bartley to 5 years of probation. Probation is a form of supervised release. It requires regular check-ins with a probation officer. It includes conditions that must be met. It is designed to monitor individuals who have demonstrated criminal behavior while allowing them to remain in the community rather than being incarcerated. The theory is that supervision will prevent reoffending. In Bartley's case, probation failed to prevent an escalation to homicide. The terms of Bartley's probation would have included standard conditions: regular meetings with a probation officer, potential drug and alcohol testing given his DWI conviction, prohibitions on possessing weapons, and requirements to maintain employment or education. Whether Bartley complied with these conditions between 2022 and November 2025 remains a question relevant to understanding how the system failed to protect Roseberline. Warning signs were present. A man with weapons charges and a DWI conviction displays a specific pattern. The weapons charge suggests a capacity for violence or at minimum a comfort with weapons. The DWI charge suggests impaired decision-making and substance issues. Together, these convictions should have flagged Bartley as a potential danger, particularly in the context of an intimate relationship. But the system's failures did not end with the 2022 conviction. In May 2025, just 6 months before he killed Roseberline, Bartley was charged again. At the time of his arrest for murder, Bartley had an open drunk driving and weapons possession case from May pending in White Plains. He was arrested on new charges while still on probation for previous offenses. This represents a clear escalation pattern. The May 2025 charges raise critical questions. How was Bartley still free? Why had his probation not been revoked after new weapons and DWI charges? What oversight existed? These questions point to system failures that would allow a man with multiple weapons charges and substance abuse issues to remain free in the community, with access to the mother of his child. Escalation patterns in domestic violence cases follow predictable trajectories. Abusers who commit crimes outside the home, weapons offenses, DWI, often also commit violence within intimate relationships. Substance abuse reduces inhibitions and increases volatility. Access to weapons increases lethality. Bartley displayed all of these risk factors, yet the system did not intervene. Following the birth of their son in 2023, Roseberline Philippe reportedly grew fearful of Justin Bartley. This fear marked a turning point. She was attempting to end the relationship. The decision to leave represents the most dangerous period in an abusive relationship. Abusers perceive the loss of control as intolerable. The risk of violence escalates dramatically during separation. The changes in Bartley's behavior manifested in ways common to abusive relationships: control tactics, isolation attempts, financial control, and emotional and psychological abuse. While specific incidents remain documented only in the memories of Roseberline and those she confided in, the pattern is consistent with domestic violence dynamics. An abuser seeks to control every aspect of the victim's life. When that control is threatened, as it was when Roseberline tried to leave, violence often follows. Roseberine's family observed the relationship's deterioration. They made attempts to protect her. But family members face a difficult position when loving someone in an abusive relationship. Pushing too hard can cause the victim to withdraw, cutting off the very support system that might save her. Not pushing hard enough can leave the victim vulnerable. The Philippe family would ultimately stage a direct confrontation with Bartley on November 1, 2025, but by then, the trajectory toward violence was already set. Cultural and social factors affect help-seeking behavior in domestic violence situations. Some victims fear they won't be believed. Others worry about the impact on their children. Some face economic barriers that make leaving seem impossible. Roseberline lived with her parents, which should have provided a safety net, but it did not ultimately protect her from a man determined to prevent her from leaving. On November 1, 2025, one day before Roseberline Philippe would be beaten to death, her family staged an intervention. Roseberine's sister Ivina described a heated family confrontation with Bartley at their White Plains home. During this confrontation, the family's collective stance was clear. Bartley was told to leave. The family believed they were protecting Roseberline. They thought their unified front would be enough. Ivina later noted, "We thought she was coming home." This statement encapsulates the family's belief that they had successfully ended Bartley's access to Roseberline. They told him to leave. They supported Rosebeline's decision to end the relationship. They thought she was safe. What was said during this confrontation remains known only to those present. Bartley's reaction to being told to leave was not documented in ways that would predict the violence to come. But Ivina's later reflection provides insight into what may have been happening beneath the surface. "But I think he had a plan for her not to come home." This suggests that rather than accepting the family's decision, Bartley may have already determined that if he could not have Roseberline, no one would. Statistics on separation violence are stark. Leaving an abusive relationship is the most lethal period for victims. This is because abuse is fundamentally about power and control. When a victim leaves, the abuser loses control. For some abusers, this loss of control triggers a decision. If I cannot control you, I will end you. This is why domestic violence advocates emphasize safety planning during separation, including changing locations, varying routines, and obtaining restraining orders. The abuser's loss of control manifests in different ways. Some engage in stalking. Some escalate threats. Some, like Bartley, move directly to lethal violence. Premeditation indicators include planning the location, a motel room where no one would intervene, ensuring the victim is isolated from her support system, and creating an opportunity to commit violence without immediate detection. At 8:30 a.m. on November 2, 2025, Roseberline Philippe arrived at the Days Inn Motel in Elmsford, New York, with Justin Bartley and their 2-year-old son. The motel sat on Valley Road off the Sawmill River Parkway. The specific location was 25 Valley Avenue, easily accessible from I-287. Surveillance cameras captured their arrival at room 230. Questions remain about how Bartley convinced Roseberline to meet him at this motel. It was not immediately clear how or why Roseberline ended up at the motel with her ex-boyfriend and their son. One possibility. This was supposed to be a custody exchange. Parents who share a child must continue to interact even after a relationship ends. Meeting at a neutral location for custody exchanges is common practice. A motel parking lot might have seemed public enough to be safe. But room 230 was not a parking lot. It was an enclosed space with a locked door. Once inside, Roseberline was isolated. Her 2-year-old son was present, a fact that would later result in an endangering the welfare of a child charge against Bartley, but which also meant there was no adult witness, no one to call for help, no one to intervene. For 8 hours, from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Roseberline Philippe was subjected to a prolonged assault. A police investigation would later determine that Bartley beat his ex for hours before she died. The timeline is precise because of surveillance cameras. Arrival at 8:30 a.m. Departure at 4:30 p.m. 8 hours of terror. Room 230 became a crime scene. The specifics of the violence inflicted remain documented in autopsy reports and crime scene photographs that the public will not see. What is known? The assault was sustained. It lasted for hours. The cause of death was being beaten to death. This indicates blunt force trauma, likely to the head and body, delivered repeatedly over an extended period. The child was a witness to his mother's murder. At 2 years old, he could not articulate what he saw, but the trauma would be recorded in his developing brain. Why no one heard or intervened during those 8 hours raises questions about motel security and safety protocols. Were the walls too thick? Did no one walk past room 230 during those hours? Did housekeeping have instructions not to disturb rooms during certain hours? The isolation of the motel room, designed to provide privacy for guests, became the mechanism that prevented anyone from saving Roseberline. At 4:30 p.m., surveillance footage captured Bartley fleeing the scene with their toddler son. He was heading to his family in the Bronx. The cameras recorded what they saw, a man leaving with a small child. Bartley's demeanor on camera would later be analyzed by investigators. Was he calm, agitated, running, walking? The child's visible condition would also be examined. Was the child crying, injured, traumatized? Later that afternoon, motel cleaning staff discovered Philippe's battered body. Housekeeping employees, trained to clean rooms and change sheets, instead found a crime scene. The trauma to the housekeeping staff, walking into a room and finding a body, is a secondary impact of domestic violence. The initial response by motel management would have involved calling 911, securing the scene, and preventing other guests from accessing the area. The 911 call came in that afternoon. First responders arrived to find Roseberline Philippe dead in room 230. Scene documentation began immediately. Photographs, measurements, evidence collection. The room's contents would be catalogued. The position of the body would be recorded. The investigation into her death was underway. An immediate investigation was launched. Bartley had fled to the Bronx, where he left the child with relatives. This decision, to leave the child with family rather than take him further, suggested Bartley knew his time as a free man was limited. Multi-agency coordination began immediately. A task force involving Elmsford Police, County Police, and the FBI worked to locate Bartley. Tracking his movements through surveillance and technology provided a timeline. Cameras at the motel showed his departure. Traffic cameras may have tracked his vehicle. Cell phone tower pings would have indicated his movement from Elmsford to the Bronx. The race against time was driven by multiple concerns: apprehending a murderer before he could flee further, ensuring the child's safety, and gathering evidence before it could be destroyed. The arrest came later that same day. Bartley was located in the Bronx. The specifics of his arrest, his condition, his demeanor, whether he resisted, remain part of the investigative record. His statements, or his refusal to speak, would be noted. The child was safely recovered from relatives who had been caring for him, unaware that his mother was dead. Evidence collected from Bartley at the time of his arrest included his clothing, which would be tested for blood evidence. Forensic evidence from his person, DNA under his fingernails, injuries to his hands consistent with striking another person repeatedly, would be documented. Room 230 served as the primary crime scene. Forensic evidence collection followed standard protocols. Blood evidence analysis would determine blood spatter patterns, indicating the violence of the assault. DNA evidence would confirm the identities of those present. Signs of struggle, overturned furniture, defensive wounds on the victim, disturbed bedding, would be photographed and documented. The timeline reconstruction relied on multiple sources. Surveillance footage provided precise arrival and departure times. The medical examiner's findings would indicate time of death, though in cases of prolonged assault, pinpointing an exact moment of death can be challenging. The cause of death determination, beaten to death, indicated the mechanism: blunt force trauma delivered repeatedly. Digital evidence extended beyond surveillance cameras. Cell phone records and tower pings created a map of movements. Text messages and communications between Roseberline and Bartley in the days and hours before her death would be recovered. Social media activity might reveal threats or concerning behavior. The digital footprint of the relationship, messages, photos, posts, would be compiled to establish the history and dynamics of their interactions. Witness statements came from multiple sources. Motel staff provided accounts of what they saw and heard, or didn't hear, which raised its own questions. Family members provided accounts of the November 1st confrontation and Roseberline's state of mind in the days before her death. The 2-year-old child, as a witness, would be interviewed using age-appropriate forensic interview techniques designed to gather information without traumatizing or leading a young child. Other guests at the motel who may have heard something, raised voices, sounds of violence, a child crying, would be interviewed to establish whether opportunities to intervene existed. Justin Bartley was charged with second-degree murder and endangering the welfare of a child. The legal definitions of these charges are specific. Second-degree murder in New York is defined as intentionally causing the death of another person. It does not require premeditation, which would elevate it to first-degree murder, but it does require intent to kill. The maximum penalty for second-degree murder in New York is 25 years to life in prison. The decision to charge second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder reflects the prosecution's assessment of what they can prove. First-degree murder requires proving premeditation, that the defendant planned the killing in advance. While Bartley's actions after the November 1st confrontation might suggest planning, proving premeditation beyond a reasonable doubt can be challenging. Second-degree murder requires only proving that Bartley intended to kill Roseberline at the time he beat her to death. The endangerment charge stems from having the child present during the assault. Endangering the welfare of a child in New York applies when a person knowingly acts in a manner likely to be injurious to the physical, mental, or moral welfare of a child. Beating someone to death in front of a 2-year-old clearly meets this standard. Bartley pleaded not guilty during his arraignment. This is standard procedure. Even defendants who committed the crime often plead not guilty initially, preserving their options for plea negotiations later. The arraignment took place with Judge Maurice Dean Williams presiding. The judge issued temporary orders of protection for Philippe's family, preventing Bartley from contacting them while the case proceeds. Bail was denied. Given the severity of the charges and Bartley's history of violating probation, he was deemed a flight risk and a danger to the community. He is being held at the Westchester County Jail pending trial. A defense attorney was assigned or retained to represent him, though the attorney's name has not been widely publicized. The next court hearing is scheduled for March 6, 2026. Between now and then, pre-trial motions will be filed. The defense may challenge the admissibility of certain evidence. The prosecution may seek to introduce evidence of Bartley's prior bad acts to establish a pattern. The evidence discovery phase involves both sides exchanging information about what evidence they plan to present at trial. The case is being prosecuted by Assistant District Attorneys Brian Bendish and Marissa Mora-Wynn. Their prosecutorial strategy will focus on establishing that Bartley intentionally killed Roseberline Philippe. Key evidence to be presented includes the surveillance footage showing the 8-hour timeline, the medical examiner's testimony about the cause of death, forensic evidence from the crime scene, and testimony from family members about the November 1st confrontation and Roseberline's fear of Bartley. Expert witnesses will likely include the medical examiner to explain the injuries and cause of death, forensic experts to discuss blood evidence and DNA, and potentially a domestic violence expert to explain the dynamics of abusive relationships and separation violence. Domestic violence expert testimony serves to educate the jury about patterns that may seem counterintuitive. Why did Roseberline meet Bartley at the motel after her family told him to leave? An expert can explain that victims of domestic violence often maintain contact due to shared children, continued emotional attachment, or fear of escalating violence if they cut off all contact. The expert can also explain why the period after leaving is the most dangerous, providing context for why the November 1st confrontation may have triggered Bartley's decision to kill. The challenge of proving premeditation versus heat of passion is relevant primarily if the defense argues for a lesser charge of manslaughter. Heat of passion requires showing that the defendant acted in response to an immediate provocation that would cause a reasonable person to lose control. The prosecution will argue that an 8-hour assault cannot be explained as heat of passion. If Bartley lost control at 8:30 a.m., he had 8 hours to regain it. Instead, he continued the assault until Roseberline died. Westchester County District Attorney Susan Cacase issued a public statement after Bartley's arrest. "My heart aches for Ms. Philippe's family, who have lost the companionship of their beloved daughter, sister, and friend. Ms. Philippe was also a new mother and had so much left of her life to share with her young son." This statement served multiple purposes: expressing sympathy for the family, reminding the public that Roseberline was a person with a life and relationships, and signaling that the district attorney's office takes domestic violence homicides seriously. Bartley's probation status significantly affects the case. He was on probation at the time of the attack for his 2022 weapons and DWI convictions. He had pending charges from May 2025 for additional weapons possession and drunk driving. Additional charges related to probation violations will be filed. The May 2025 pending case creates complications because it demonstrates a pattern of escalating criminal behavior. Potential consecutive sentences mean that if convicted of murder and probation violations, Bartley could face additional prison time beyond the sentence for the murder itself. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. 4 more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.